So now I just want to take you through some of the key features and benefits of the SEGO R750 machine. So, in order to do this, I just want to remove the side panel or the side cover in order to show you clearly what some of the main features and benefits are and the clear advantages that we have over some of our opposition's machines. Here we have a side cover, of which it's attached to the machine via 4 screws at each point of the side cover. So if I just back off using an Allen key, these screws, the side cover can then be removed, and then you will see the whole entire internal workings of the machine. Key things that I really want to draw your attention to is in particular the whole motor and the pulley area. So you'll see the motor here is bolted hard down to the frame of the machine, which goes around the whole entire length of the machine, and it's one continuous casting, which makes the machine extremely sturdy. So I'm just going to draw your attention to the 240 volt 1.23 horsepower motor which powers the R750 machine. You'll notice that we have these solid and heavy duty plastic blocks which are one piece and go all the way through to the other side of the machine. The motor is bolted hard down to these blocks, which adds another form of insulation from the motor to the main frame. Once again, it's another safety point for preventing electrocution to the outside of the frame. You'll also notice that with all induction motors, we have a capacitor here to the motor and delivers the 500 volt charge to get the motor started. With all induction motors, they will all use a capacitor. The capacitor's only function is to deliver that initial 500 volt charge to get the motor started, of which then the rest of the motor and internal windings then take over and continue in the running of the machine. You'll also see where the on-off switch or the forward and reverse switch is located here is also a plastic shield which prevents any contact from any of the electrical contacts to the outer surface of the R750 machine. Just draw your attention to the switch and the state of the switch being absolutely strong, sturdy and heavy duty. It's a simple forward and reverse switch, but you can imagine over the life of the machine this switch is going to be operated possibly hundreds, possibly thousands of times depending on the life of the machine. If we can get a close-in view of this switch here, the switch, as you can see, is extremely positive and extremely heavy duty, which will ensure the longevity of the switch. Something that I'd really like to draw your attention to is the way that motor pulley is positioned in relation to the main pulley of the machine here. Now you can see, because the motor is bolted hard down to the frame of the machine, the motor, it's impossible for the motor to be moved either forward, to the side, backwards, up, down, whatever. It just stays permanently fixed to the frame, which then prevents any movement of the pulley in relation to the main pulley up here. So therefore, the amount of power that's being delivered from the motor via the pulley up to this main pulley will be the same amount of power from the very first time you use your R750 to using your R750 15, 20 years later. One of the key reasons of why the R750 is so good at being able to efficiently transfer the power from the motor pulley to the main pulley of the machine is the distance that it has to travel. With all transfer of power, the further the distance the transfer of power has to travel, the more inefficient it becomes. So you can see the distance, if I turn the machine closer to you there, the distance between this pulley and this main pulley is as minimal as it can be. The R750 uses a fantastic method of using a flat tooth belt. This flat tooth belt, as opposed to a V-belt, which is one of the most inefficient forms of transmission available today. One of the key things that I want to draw your attention to is the solid and sturdy construction of all of the internal workings of the R750 machine. So we can see here these connecting arms, which are then connected up to the main handle. So that when I then depress this handle down, you can see just how heavy duty this solid steel plate is, which is galvanised for protection of rust, which then transfers all the way down this main arm. This main arm is then bolted to, as you can see, a heavy duty solid steel collar. This solid steel collar, in front of that is a heavy duty thrust race or ball race bearing, which is then putting load onto a tapered cone. If I just position the machine a little bit slightly here, you might be able to get a better view of this tapered cone. So this tapered cone is then forced forward, and when I force that tapered cone forward, you can then see these three individual rocker arms, or what we call rocker arms, which are then attached, all individually attached by a spring. This spring is now connected to these rocker arms, which then comes forward and as a pivot point on these jaws, or clutch jaws, are then depressed all the way down, which then in turn grips your cable. If I spin the machine around, we can probably focus in on the inside of the tube here, so that when I depress the lever, you can then see the three individual clutch jaws, which then come down and then grip the cable, providing power to spin the cable whilst it's down the drain. One of the key features from a safety point of view on the R750 is, as you can see here, where the electrical lead comes out of the machine, it's encased in a solid rubber grommet, protecting the most vulnerable point of the lead. The lead then continues all of the way down to the 3-pin plug, which is again encased in a one-piece solid plastic plug, preventing any possible water from coming in and then making contact with any of the electrical wires inside the plug. One of the other key features of the R750 machine is in its transportation. You'll see when I depress the handle here, you can see this solid heavy-duty plate steel coming forward, and you'll notice when I lift up this little button at the back there, you get another piece of heavy gauge steel dropping down, of which there's a little cutout inside this plate steel here. When I pull that up and then I let the handle go, you'll then see the handle is then locked into position. This is ideal for when you're carrying the machine to and from the job, or from your van to the job, so that when you are carrying it, you're not putting all of the weight or all of the stress up on the handle itself. So you'll see once again, when I press this handle down and then I lift this button up here, it locks the handle in position, and so now all of the weight transfer is acting against this solid heavy gauge plate steel, ensuring that all the weight from the machine is being lifted at its strongest possible point. One of the most key points about the R750 in relation to any of our competitors is the servicing or lack of servicing when it comes to the R750. You'll notice we have two little grease points here, and this in the main is primarily the only need of service that you will require over the working life of your R750. We have two grease nipple points here, one for the main bearing and the thrust bearing behind or in front of this solid steel collar, and this other grease nipple here, which is attached and then lubricates the main bearing, which is supporting the main spindle of the machine. It may also pay from time to time just to give a little bit of lubrication to this main back bearing here, just as a precaution and to ensure the longevity of the bearing. So as I was showing you before in regards to the handle here, this is the way the handle would be positioned 9 times out of 10 whenever you're using the machine outside, but occasionally you might want to go inside. So when you are faced with restricted access or a tight position when using the machine, you may not be able to have or to use the machine in this position. So with the R750, by pulling down this little collar here, you'll see there's a roll pin which goes through that collar. If you pull that collar down, you can then release the handle. You can then turn the handle around and use it in a different position so that you're not restricted by height now, and you can then use the machine in this way. So now I just want to show you one of the key reasons of why it's so important to use the guide hose, as I was alluding to before earlier on in the video. So if I insert my cable as I would normally on the job, you'll then see the cable come through the back of the machine. Usually the guide hose would be attached and in position, but for the purposes of what I'm about to show you, I need to have the guide hose off, just to emphasise why it's so important to have the guide hose attached to the machine. So when I pull the cable through, you can imagine now if I was to depress the handle whilst the machine was on, that the jaws would come down and grip the cable and therefore spin the cable. Now if I didn't have this cable protected at the back, this cable is allowed to run around freely. Now you can imagine that if we're down the side of a house or inside someone's house, the amount of damage that an unprotected cable could cause to the surrounding environment. But also, when talking in terms of the machine, if I spin the machine around now, you can see how the cable comes out the back of the machine, and around the back of that main shaft we then have an aluminium nut which then holds the whole shaft in relation to the machine in place. So if I don't have this cable supported by the guide hose, I'm going to over-exaggerate things, but you can imagine what the cable is doing now, where it's spinning around and oscillating around the back of the machine and would be wearing out that main spindle into a bell shape, which when that main spindle wears out, it then would start to cut through that main spindle and then go into the aluminium nut and then destroying the main spindle thread of which that nut is then screwed onto. If that ever does happen to the machine, it becomes an expensive repair. So now I'm just going to hook up the guide hose to the machine and put the guide hose in position. So just insert that over the back of the cable which is already in position through the machine. I then position the casting, and there's two locating lugs there, and then just with two little butterfly nuts there, I tighten those butterfly nuts up so that guide hose is now fixed permanently to the machine. I then push the cable all the way back through the machine. So that I'm left with about a metre and a half of cable, of exposed cable, coming out the front of the machine. This is the part that you would then insert into the drain after you've attached one of your cutters. So if I just get one of the cutters, and for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to use one of our shovel head drills. You'll notice on all Rothenberger cables and accessories, we have on one side of the coupling only a little ramp or a little slide. This is a good way of determining or differentiating Rothenberger or genuine Rothenberger cutters and accessories, so that you can see that on this side of the coupling I'm not able to insert or attach the cable to the cutter. I can only do it from one side, so it just makes it nice and easy for the cutter to slide onto the end of the coupling and then lock into position. Now I'd like to emphasise that under no circumstances should you ever operate the machine with the side covers off, because for obvious reasons we have exposed or moving parts which could then come into contact with yourself or your hands or any part of your clothing and then possibly get caught. It's extremely important that you never operate the machine without the side covers off. So I'm going to turn the machine on now. So you can see now how I'm using the 1¼ or 32mm cables in the machine. So once again I just want to turn it on and quickly show you how we can run two different size cables but without the need for changing these clutch jaws here. So as you can see, 32mm or 1¼ cables. Turn the machine on. Stretch the cable and start to spin the cable. So if I turn the machine off, I now have a length of 7/8 or 22mm cable in my hand, which I'll then insert into the machine. And once again, just leaving about a metre and a half of exposed cable at the front. I'll then pick up a 7/8 or a 22mm straight drill. Once again, we have the little ramp on the side of this coupling, which makes for easy insertion of the coupling and attachment to the end of the cable. So you'll see that I haven't made any adjustments or changes to any of the clutch jaws. Now when I turn the machine on, when I depress the handle, again there we have the spinning of the cable. The R750 machine is the only machine in its class that's capable of being able to run both 1 1/4 or 32mm and 7/8 or 22mm cables.